The dog tried to kill 3 men before breakfast. That was the first thing everyone whispered when the blind veteran's white cane tapped into the Canine Rehabilitation Center that morning. Metal bars still bent outward from the last attack. Bloodstains had been scrubbed, but the smell lingered. And behind the final reinforced kennel at the end of the hallway, the most dangerous retired police dog in the state waited isolated, condemned, and scheduled for permanent sedation by the end of the week. I share new stories here every day and would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. The soft tap, tap, tap of the cane echoed long before anyone noticed the man holding it. Ethan Walker moved carefully, shoulders squared, posture rigid with military discipline. His eyes were clouded and unfocused, but his face held no weakness. He had lost his sight 3 years earlier in an explosion. Overseas, an explosion that killed 2 men beside him and ended the life he once knew. Write in the comments and tell me which part of the world you're watching this story from. I'm really interested to see how far this story has traveled. The war followed him home anyway, Mr. Walker. A woman's voice called, warm but cautious. "I'm Karen. I'll be assisting you today." Ethan smiled faintly. "Please just, Ethan." She guided him forward, her hand hovering near his elbow without touching. The hallway smelled of disinfectant, steel, and wet fur. Dogs barked from both sides, some excited, some fearful, some lonely. Ethan listened. Most people heard noise. Ethan heard emotion. "Before we start," Karen said gently, "I should explain. All the dogs you'll meet today are fully trained service animals. Calm temperament. No aggression. Perfect candidates." Ethan nodded, but his grip tightened on the cane. "I'm not looking for perfect," he said quietly. "I'm looking for honest." Karen didn't know how to respond to that. They walked deeper into the facility when suddenly a roar exploded down the corridor. Not a bark. A violent, bone-shaking snarl that rattled the steel doors and vibrated through the floor. The sound carried rage, grief, and something feral. Dogs nearby went silent. Karen stopped dead. "Let's keep moving," she said quickly. "That kennel isn't part of the tour." Ethan didn't move. His head tilted slightly, listening. "That one," he said. "What's wrong with him?" Karen hesitated. "He's not adoptable." Another crash of metal followed. Something heavy slamming into bars with terrifying force. "He's a retired police K9, she continued. "German Shepherd. Elite unit. His handler was killed last year. Since then, he's been unstable, aggressive, dangerous." Ethan swallowed. There was pain in that sound. Deep, familiar pain. "He shouldn't be here," Karen added. "But he's earned the right to live, so we keep him isolated." As they passed, Ethan heard staff whispering nearby. "Thor went crazy again this morning. He nearly tore a handler's arm off. That dog is a monster. They should have put him down." The name hit Ethan like a punch. "Thor," he repeated. Karen stiffened. "Please don't focus on him. He's attacked everyone who's come close." But as they walked past the reinforced kennel, the roaring stopped. Suddenly, silence. No growling. No pacing. Just heavy breathing. Ethan stopped inside the kennel. The massive German Shepherd stood completely still. Handlers froze. Thor's ears twitched. His breathing slowed. His body leaned forward toward the bars. Then something no one had heard from him in over a year. A low, broken whine escaped his chest. Karen's breath caught. "That's impossible," one handler whispered. "He's never made that sound." Ethan took one step closer. Karen grabbed his arm. "Ethan, no. He's dangerous." But Thor didn't lunge. He didn't bark. He pressed his muzzle against the bars and inhaled deeply. trembling as if he recognized something he had lost and just found again. Ethan's voice was barely audible. "That's not aggression," he said. "That's grief." And for the first time since his handler died, Thor chose not to attack. He chose to wait. Thor had bitten 6 men. That fact echoed in Karen's mind as she stood frozen beside Ethan, watching the impossible unfold. 6 trained handlers, 6 attacks, broken bones, torn flesh, lawsuits narrowly avoided. And yet now, the same dog stood inches from a blind stranger, silent, trembling, breathing like he was afraid to move. I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I sure you love it if you keep listening till the end. "Ethan," Karen whispered urgently, "we need to go. Right now." But Ethan didn't move. His head tilted slightly toward the kennel, listening not to the dog's body, but to his breath. It was uneven, controlled, but barely. Like someone holding themselves together by force alone, Thor shifted his weight, claws scraping softly against the concrete. Every handler tensed, tranquilizer poles rising instinctively. "He's going to lunge," one muttered. He dean single quotes, T, instead. Thor sat. The sound of his body lowering to the floor hit the hallway like a shockwave. "No," another handler breathed. "That's not possible." Thor had never sat on command since his handler died. Not once, not for food, not for threats, not even under sedation. Ethan exhaled slowly. "He's listening," he said. Karen swallowed. Listening to what? To me, that was when the facility director arrived. Mr. Helverson's footsteps were sharp, decisive. Authority followed him like a shadow. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Why is there a civilian near that kennel?" Karen turned quickly. "Sir, I tried to move him, but nothing," Halverson snapped. "That dog is unstable. Get him out of here," Thor growled low. Protective not at Ethan at Halverson. Every muscle in Thor's body shifted forward, positioning himself closer to the bars as if shielding Ethan from a threat only he could sense. Halverson stiffened. "You see," he said. "This is exactly why he cannot be adopted." Ethan raised one hand calmly. "He's protecting, not attacking." Halverson laughed bitterly. "You're blind, Mr. Walker. With respect, you can't see what that dog really is." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I can hear what others ignore," he replied, "and I can feel what they're afraid to admit." Thor let out another soft, broken sound, tail barely moving against the floor. Silence fell. Karen felt it, then the shift. The air wasn't tense anymore. It was heavy, emotional, like a wound being reopened. Halverson folded his arms. "Karen, remove Mr. Walker. Now." Ethan took one step forward. Karen grabbed his sleeve. "Ethan, please. If you get closer, they'll sedate him." Thor stood instantly. A warning growl vibrated through his chest, not wild, not feral, but desperate. Ethan stopped. "It's okay," he said softly. Voice steady. "I won't come closer unless you want me to." Thor froze. Then slowly he lay down again. A collective gasp rippled through the hallway. "He's responding to boundaries," Karen whispered. Stunned, double quotes, "No," Halverson said sharply. "He's unpredictable." Ethan turned his face toward Thor's kennel. "You lost someone," Ethan said quietly. "So did I." Thor's breathing hitched. Ethan continued, voice low, intimate. "They told me I was broken too, dangerous to myself, unfit for normal life." Thor's ears flattened. "They locked parts of me away," Ethan said, "just like they did to you." Thor crawled forward until his chest pressed. Against the bars, the handlers backed up instinctively. Ethan reached out but stopped inches short of the metal. "I won't touch you," he said. "I promise." Thor sniffed the air wildly, then pressed his nose to the exact spot where Ethan's hand hovered. Contact. Without contact, Karen felt tears sting her eyes. Halverson shook his head. "This is manipulation. Trauma bonding. It's not real." Thor lifted his head and barked once sharp, clear, directed not at Ethan, at Halverson. The message was unmistakable. Karen spoke before she could stop herself. "Sir, he's choosing." Halverson's face darkened. "That dog doesn't get to choose." Thor's body stiffened. Ethan's voice hardened for the first time. "Neither did I." A long silence followed. Finally, Halverson exhaled sharply. "Fine, 10 minutes. Supervised evaluation only. One wrong move, and it ends." Karen's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I want proof," he said coldly. "Before this gets someone killed." Ethan nodded slowly. Thor's tail thumped once against the concrete. The handlers unlocked the inner gate, and for the first time in a year, Thor was no longer alone in his cage. No one breathed when the gate opened. The metallic click echoed through the secured wing like a gunshot, and every handler's hand tightened around their equipment. Tranquilizer guns were raised. Safety poles hovered in the air. One wrong move, and Thor would be sedated or worse. I share news stories here every day and would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Ethan stepped forward first, not confidently. Not bravely, carefully, his cane tapped the concrete once, twice, mapping a world he could no longer see. Thor rose slowly inside the kennel, massive frame unfolding like a coiled storm. His muscles tensed. His breathing deepened. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not a threat, but confusion battling instinct. "Stop right there." A handler whispered sharply. Ethan stopped. "I'm not coming closer unless you tell me to," he said. Voice-steady Thor took one step forward. The handlers flinched. Another step. Metal creaked as his weight shifted. "Trank him now," someone muttered. Halverson lifted a hand. "Wait." Thor lowered his head and sniffed the air, desperate and frantic, like he was chasing a memory instead of a scent. His nose twitched violently when he reached Ethan's jacket. Thor froze. Then he whined. Sound so fragile it shattered the tension in the room. Ethan frowned slightly. "You smell something you recognize." Thor pressed his muzzle gently against Ethan's chest. Gasps erupted. "He's making contact," Karen whispered. Ethan's hand trembled as he slowly lifted it, stopping just before touching Thor's neck. "Is this okay?" Ethan asked softly. Thor leaned in. Permission. Ethan's single quotes S fingers sank into thick fur, warm and solid beneath his palm. The growl died. Thor exhaled, long, shaking. Human. And then everything went wrong. A loud crash echoed from the far wing. A metal shelf collapsed. Dogs barked. Someone shouted. Thor reacted instantly. His body snapped around, instincts igniting like a match to gasoline. He lunged not at Ethan but toward the sound. The handlers panicked. "Thor, down." Someone yelled. Too late. A handler slipped. Thor turned back. Teeth flashing, fear overriding trust for a split second. Ethan was in the way. Karen screamed. "Ethan." Thor slammed into Ethan's chest, knocking him hard against the concrete. The room exploded. "Fire." "Sedate him." "Pull Ethan out." Thor stood over Ethan, teeth bared, chest heaving. Blood spread across the floor. Ethan lay still. Karen's heart stopped. "Thor." Halverson roared. Back. Thor froze, not because of the command, because Ethan whispered, "I'm okay." Thor's ears twitched. "I know you're scared," Ethan said through pain. "But I'm still here." Thor's teeth slowly lowered. He sniffed Ethan's face frantically. Whining, licking, nudging, checking. Ethan groaned as Karen slid beside him. "He didn't bite me," Ethan gasped. "I hit the floor." Thor lay down beside him, pressing his body protectively against Ethan's side. Growling at anyone who came too close. "Get him off," a handler yelled. "No," Karen snapped. Look, Thor's body was shaking. Not aggression, fear. Halvorsen stared in disbelief. Thor hadn't attacked. He had shielded. Ethan coughed, blood trickling from his temple. "He thought something bad was happening again," he said. He panicked. Thor nudged Ethan's chest, whimpering. "You didn't fail," Ethan whispered. "You just didn't want to lose anyone." Silence swallowed the room. Halvorsen's voice cracked. "Call medical." As paramedics rushed in, Thor refused to move, placing himself between Ethan and every stranger. It took Ethan gripping his fur and whispering reassurance to get Thor to allow help, as Ethan was lifted onto a stretcher. Thor tried to follow. "Easy," Karen murmured, tears streaming. "He needs help." Thor went, pacing, eyes locked on Ethan as if terrified he would disappear. Ethan reached out. "I'll come back," he promised. Thor barked one sharp. Broken, the door closed, and for the second time in his life. Thor watched his person be taken away. Only this time, he didn't break. He waited. Thor did not move for 6 hours. After Ethan was rushed to the hospital. Handlers expected the usual explosions, screaming, smashing, self-destruction. Instead, the massive German Shepherd lay near the kennel door. Eyes fixed on the empty hallway. Body tense, but still waiting. I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I sure you love it if you keep listening till the end. Karen noticed it first. "He's not pacing." She whispered to another handler. "He's holding himself together." Thor didn't touch his food, didn't drink water, didn't sleep. Every sound made his ears twitch. Footsteps, radios, doors opening, but when they weren't Ethan's. He stayed where he was. Halvorsen stood outside the kennel long after his shift ended. He'd replayed the moment again and again. Thor hadn't bitten, Thor hadn't attacked. Thor had protected. Pull his full file. Halvorsen finally said. Karen blinked. "Sir, everything," he repeated. "Training logs, deployment footage, handler reports. I want to know what we missed." Karen nodded and disappeared into the records room. What she found changed everything. Thor wasn't just a police dog. He had been deployed overseas. Classified program. Joint military K9 operations. Thor had worked with soldiers long before he ever wore a police badge. His handler, Officer Daniel Reeves, hadn't been his first partner. He'd been his second. The first had been killed by an eyed. Karen's hands trembled as she scrolled. Thor had pulled 3 wounded soldiers from a collapsed vehicle under fire. He had detected explosives that saved an entire platoon. He had once stayed beside a fallen soldier for 12 hours, refusing to leave the body until extraction. The notes ended abruptly. Subject shows signs of attachment trauma. Recommend limited handler reassignment. They hadn't listened. Halvorsen sank into a chair when Karen showed him the file. "He's not unstable," Karen said softly. "He's re-traumatized." Halvorsen rubbed his face. "We kept treating him like a broken weapon." Karen swallowed. "He reacts to soldiers because they remind him of loss." "And Ethan," Halvorsen whispered, "smells like the battlefield." Cross town, Ethan lay in a hospital bed. Stitches pulling at his scalp. "You're lucky," the doctor said. "Another inch and you'd have fractured your skull." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've had worse." Karen stood beside him, nervous. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have let it happen." Ethan shook his head. "You did the right thing." He turned his face toward her. "How is he?" Karen hesitated, waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly. "He thinks I left." Karen's voice cracked. "I think he knows you'll come back." 2 days passed. Thor refused all interaction except Karen's voice. Even then, he didn't look at her, only toward the hallway. Then, on the 3rd day, a familiar rhythm reached his ears. Tap, 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 tap. Thor's single quotes as head snapped up. His entire body froze. The cane he bolted to the kennel door, barking not rage, not fear, but something raw and desperate. Ethan's voice echoed down the hall. "Easy, boy." "I'm here," Thor howled. Not like a dog, like someone who had been holding in grief and finally broke. Handlers rushed forward, panicked, but Halvorson stopped them. "Open it," he said. Karen stared. "Sir, he's waited long enough." The door opened. Thor launched forward, stopping just inches from Ethan, trembling violently. He sniffed, circled, pressed his body against him so hard Ethan nearly lost balance. "I told you," Ethan whispered, gripping his fur. "I told you I'd come back." Thor collapsed at his feet, not in submission, in relief. Halvorson cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker." "Ethan." "Yes. We made a mistake." Silence. "We labeled him dangerous when he was grieving. And we nearly destroyed him." Thor rested his head against Ethan's leg. Ethan nodded. "Then let him choose." Halvorson exhaled deeply. "We'll begin reassessment for permanent placement." Karen gasped. "With you," Halvorson added. Thor lifted his head sharply. Ethan smiled, and for the first time since losing everything, both of them had hope again. The reassessment was supposed to be quiet, controlled, safe. That was the word Halvorson kept repeating as staff prepared the evaluation yard behind the facility. Fences were checked twice. Emergency equipment laid out. Medical staff on standby. Nothing unexpected. That was the plan. I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I sure you love it. If you keep listening till the end. Thor walked beside Ethan without a leash. That alone made half the staff uneasy. Every step Thor took was measured, deliberate. His body stayed close to Ethan's leg, guiding him subtly around obstacles before the cane even tapped them. It wasn't trained behavior, it was instinct. Karen watched from behind the glass. "He's anticipating movement," she whispered. "He's reading Ethan's body." Halvorson nodded slowly, like he's done it before. The evaluation began smoothly. Ethan followed verbal cues. Thor responded, instantly stopping at curbs, guiding left and right, halting when vehicles passed nearby. The handlers murmured in disbelief. Then the wind shifted. Thor's ears snapped upright. His body stiffened. Ethan felt it instantly. "What is it?" Thor didn't answer with movement. He planted his feet. A sharp metallic clatter echoed from the maintenance wing, followed by shouting. "Gas line!" Someone yelled. "We've got a leak." The smell hit seconds later. Natural gas, invisible. Deadly. Thor growled low and urgent, pressing hard against Ethan's leg, forcing him backward. "Thor," Ethan said, confused. The alarms hadn't gone off yet. Humans didn't know, but Thor did. He barked once, sharp and commanding, then shoved Ethan toward the exit with surprising force. Karen shouted, "What's happening?" Thor ignored everyone. He pulled Ethan away from the yard, body tense, tail rigid. Workers near the maintenance shed froze as gas hissed loudly from a ruptured pipe. A spark flew. Thor barked again, ferocious, "Evacuate." Halverson roared, but Ethan tripped. He went down hard, cane skidding across the pavement. The gas ignited. A fireball erupted behind them, heat slamming outward. Thor turned instantly. He didn't run. He shielded Thor through his body over Ethan, curling around him as flames rolled past. His back took the heat. His fur singed. His body absorbed the blast. Karen screamed. Fire crews rushed in as sprinklers finally activated. When the smoke cleared, Thor still hadn't moved. Ethan coughed beneath him. Thor. The dog lifted his head weakly. His eyes locked on Ethan's face. Then he licked Ethan's cheek. Alive, Thor collapsed beside him, breathing shallow, sides heaving. Veterinarians sprinted forward. He's burned. Smoke, inhalation. We need him inside now. Ethan grabbed Thor's fur. No, don't take him. He'll die if we don't, the vet said urgently. Thor tried to stand, failed. Ethan's single quotes' voice broke. Stay with me, please. Thor's tail thumped weakly once. They rushed him inside. Hours passed. Ethan sat alone in the corridor, hands shaking, listening to every sound behind the operating doors. Karen stood beside him silently. Halverson joined them, face pale. That dog saved every person in that yard. The doors finally opened. The vet stepped out. He's stable, barely. Ethan exhaled a broken sob. He did exactly what he was trained to do. The vet continued. And more. He chose. Karen wiped her eyes. He wasn't reassessed today. Halverson nodded. No, he passed. Inside the recovery room, Thor lay wrapped in bandages, oxygen mask fogging softly. His eyes fluttered open when Ethan entered. You stayed, Ethan whispered. Thor winced softly. Always, and in that moment, there was no doubt left anywhere. In the building, Thor wasn't dangerous. He was a guardian. Thor didn't wake up for 12 hours. The machines beside. His bed hummed steadily, each soft beep echoing like a countdown in Ethan's chest. Oxygen hissed. 4 fluids dripped. Bandages wrapped Thor's back and shoulders, hiding burns that should have killed him. I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it. If you keep listening till the end, Ethan sat in the chair beside the kennel-sized recovery bay. UNMOVING. He counted breaths. 1, 2, 3. He hadn't done that since the hospital overseas, since they told him he'd never see again. Since they told him to be grateful he was alive. Karen watched from the doorway. Afraid to interrupt. You should rest, she finally said. Ethan shook his head. If I sleep, I might miss him. Thor shifted slightly. Ethan leaned forward instantly. I'm here. The dog's ears twitched. Barely the vet returned with a clipboard. Voice quiet. We need to talk. Ethan stiffened. The burns are severe, the vet continued. His lungs took damage from the smoke. We can stabilize him, but recovery will be long, painful. Ethan swallowed. What's the other option? The vet hesitated. Euthanasia. The word hit harder than any explosion. No, Ethan said immediately. No. Karen stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Ethan. He chose to protect. Ethan snapped. You don't kill someone for that. The vet nodded slowly. I understand. But I need you to understand too. He may never be able to work again. He may suffer. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. So did I. Silence. Thor let out a faint, broken sound, like he was dreaming of pain. Ethan reached through the bars and rested his hand gently on Thor's neck. Stay, he whispered. You already saved me. Let me save you now." The vet exhaled. "If you choose treatment, you'll need to commit. Therapy, medication, constant monitoring." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." The vet studied him for a long moment. "Then we try." The next weeks were brutal. Thor screamed in his sleep. Sometimes he woke thrashing, growling, snapping at shadows. Sometimes he refused food. Sometimes he lay completely still. Staring at nothing, Ethan stayed through all of it. When Thor panicked, Ethan spoke softly. When Thor trembled, Ethan pressed close. When Thor refused to move, Ethan waited. "You don't have to be strong," Ethan told him one night. "I'll be strong for both of us." One evening, Thor lashed out, not at Ethan, at a vet reaching too quickly. The room froze. "This is why he's dangerous." A tech whispered. Ethan stepped between them. "He's scared," Ethan said firmly. "Just like anyone in pain." Thor's growl softened immediately. He leaned into Ethan, ashamed. The vet sighed. "He responds to you faster than sedation." Ethan smiled sadly. "Because he trusts me." The paperwork came 3 weeks later. Permanent adoption. One condition: he cannot return to public service. Halverson said gently. "No patrols. No public access work." Ethan nodded. "That's okay." Halverson hesitated. "He'll never be what he was." Ethan rested a hand on Thor's scarred back. "Neither will I." Thor lifted his head. Their eyes met, one blind, one wounded. Perfect the day they left the facility. Thor walked slowly, scars visible beneath his fur. Staff lined the hallway in silence. Some cried. Karen knelt and kissed Thor's head. "Thank you." Thor nudged her hand gently. Outside. The air was cool, fresh. Ethan clipped the leash knot because Thor needed it. But because the world demanded it, they took their first step, together. Not as soldier and weapon, not as handler and dog, but as survivors. Peace didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, short walks, quiet mornings, moments where Thor slept without twitching and Ethan forgot. Just for a second, that darkness surrounded him. But the world had a long memory, and it wasn't ready to forget what Thor used to be. I share new stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I sure you love it if you keep listening till the end. They lived in a small rented house on the edge of town. 1 floor, wide doorways, a fenced yard, the kind of place meant for recovery. Thor learned every inch of it in days where the steps dipped, where the fence rattled in the wind, where Ethan's foot hesitated just before the kitchen doorway. He guided without commands at night. Thor slept beside Ethan's bed, head resting against the frame. He woke at every shift in breathing, every nightmare. Sometimes Ethan woke, gasping, hands searching for something solid. Thor was always there, but outside the fence. Whispers traveled fast. "That's the dog from the fire. The one that attacked a handler? Isn't he dangerous? Why would they let that thing live near people?" The first incident happened at the grocery store. Ethan stood in line. Thor sitting calmly at his side, harness on, posture perfect. A child pointed. "Mommy, look." Big dog. The mother stiffened. Her face drained of color. She pulled the child back sharply. "That's him," she whispered loudly. "That's the attack dog." People turned. Phones came out. Thor felt it, the tension, the fear snapping through the air. His body tightened. Not in aggression, but confusion. Ethan sensed it immediately. "It's okay," he murmured, resting a hand on Thor's shoulder. "Eyes on me." Thor exhaled slowly. A man stepped forward. "Sir, you shouldn't bring that animal in public." Ethan turned toward the voice. "He's a service dog. That dog nearly killed someone. Thor lowered his head. Ethan's jaw tightened. He saved people, including me. The store manager intervened, nervous but polite. "Sir, maybe it's best if you—" Thor sneezed loud sudden. The tension snapped. A few people laughed nervously. The child giggled. The moment passed, but the damage lingered. That night, Thor refused to eat. He lay by the door, ears pinned back, staring into nothing. "They're afraid of you," Ethan said softly. "I know how that feels." Thor winked. Ethan sat on the floor beside him. "You don't have to prove anything. You already did." The real test came weeks later. Sirens shouting, a crash down the street. Thor was on his feet instantly. Body alert, focused. Ethan grabbed his cane. "What is it?" Thor barked once and moved to the door, then stopped. He looked back at Ethan, waiting. Ethan's single quotes S chest tightened. "Go," he whispered. "Check." Thor bolted outside. A car had flipped 2 houses down. Smoke poured from the hood. A woman screamed. Someone was trapped inside. Thor didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the smoke. Neighbors shouted warnings. "That dog is dangerous." Thor ignored them. He circled the wreckage, barking sharply, drawing attention, then disappeared inside the crushed car. Moments later, he emerged, dragging a child by the jacket collar. Careful. Precise applause erupted. Firefighters arrived. One froze when he saw Thor. "Wait, that's the fire dog," someone said. He saved them. Thor stood panting, soot streaking his fur. Eyes searching the crowd. Then he heard it tap. Tap. Ethan arrived. Guided by neighbors, Thor ran to him, tail wagging furiously, pressing into his legs. "You did good," Ethan whispered, voice breaking. "You did so good." The next morning, the story was everywhere. Not dangerous. Dog.hero.protector.guardian. A letter arrived that afternoon from the department, from Halverson, Thor's. "Record has been officially amended." Ethan smiled. Thor rested his head in Ethan's lap. Sighing deeply, the world hadn't forgotten, but it was finally learning. The ceremony wasn't supposed to be emotional. It was meant to be brief. A small acknowledgement outside the station. A few words. A photo. Then everyone would return to their routines, but no one expected silence to fall the moment Thor walked onto the concrete plaza. "I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video." Now let's jump back into my story. I sure you love it if you keep listening till the end. Thor moved slower now. Scars pulled faintly beneath his fur. His steps were careful, deliberate, but his posture was proud. Ethan walked beside him, one hand resting on the harness, the other gripping his cane. Officers lined the steps. Some had worked with Thor years ago. Some had feared him. Some had called for his removal. Every one of them stood at attention. The chief cleared his throat. "We're here today to recognize courage. Not the kind written in training manuals. The kind that chooses compassion over fear." Thor's ears twitched at the sound of voices. But he stayed steady. "This dog," the chief continued, "was once labeled dangerous, unstable, unadoptable. But labels don't tell the full story." Ethan felt Thor lean slightly closer. He saved lives in war. He saved lives here. And when the world gave up on him, he still chose to protect. The chief stepped forward and knelt, placing a simple medal around Thor's neck. Thor froze, then gently lowered his head. Applause broke out slow at first. Then thunderous. Ethan didn't clap. He just stood there, breathing it in. Later that evening, they sat on the porch of their small house, the sky fading into deep blues and purples. Crickets sang. The world felt. Quiet Thor lay at Ethan's feet, metal clinking softly against the wood each time he shifted. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "they used to tell me I should be grateful." Thor lifted his head. "They said surviving was enough, that I didn't need purpose anymore." Thor stood and rested his chin on Ethan's knee. "But surviving isn't living," Ethan whispered. "Not really." Thor sighed deeply. The nightmares came less often now. When they did, Thor was there. When Thor woke, shaking, Ethan spoke. They took turns being strong. Some mornings, they walked the same route past the park where children waved. Other mornings, they stayed home listening to the radio. Letting the world move without them, they didn't rush healing. They honored it. One afternoon, Karen visited. She watched Thor guide Ethan around the yard. Gentle pressure, quiet awareness. "He's perfect at this," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "No, he's himself." Karen hesitated. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd chosen a different dog?" Ethan shook his head. "No one else was waiting for me." Thor's tail thumped once as the sun dipped lower. Ethan rested his hand on Thor's scarred back. "You didn't save me because you were trained to," Ethan said. "You saved me because you understood." Thor turned his head and pressed his forehead into Ethan's chest. Two broken warriors, not fixed, but whole, that night. Ethan dreamed not of explosions, not of fire, but of walking forward without fear. When he awoke, his hand was tangled in warm fur, steady and real. The world would never fully forget what Thor once was. But that was okay, because the truth mattered more. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a weapon. He was proof that even the most wounded hearts can still choose love, and sometimes the ones labeled too dangerous to save are the very ones who save us in the end. Thanks for watching till the end. Please like and subscribe and stay connected for more interesting stories.